Well, it is great to worship with you and to sing these great songs and to just have a fresh sense of ultimate reality. And I want to start today by showing you a cartoon on the screen, and I put this in your notes as well, but it shows the arms of God reaching down to the earth, and the caption says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the..." Skip intro. As if the Bible is a show that maybe you're streaming at home and you really want to get to your favorite episodes, the Jesus episodes, as we've been exploring, right, where he just teaches in this electrifying fashion, and he defends vulnerable people against bullies, and where he restores those who are spiritually lost, and where he eats and drinks with regular people like Lazarus and Mary and Martha and so on. And then finally, where he takes upon himself our sin and he dies on the cross and he's raised on the third day. We want to get to those scenes, and of course, they are critically important, but I think that we appreciate those Jesus episodes even more deeply, and we gain even more peace in our hearts in these really crazy times when we understand those scenes in the context of this whole amazing biblical story and masterpiece. And so what I want to do just for a minute, and Daniel already did this for us just so eloquently, and I appreciate it so much, is just in a sense to play the intro again of the series for just a couple of minutes. And we should have a little background music for this like they do in the shows, where everything is recast again and you kind of get back into the heart of the story. But let me do my best here. The first thing that Genesis 1:1 says that God did is that he built a house. That God, overflowing with love, made this amazing place for himself and for his creatures like us to dwell in with him. And I'm going to call this God's homemaking mission, or God's home with humans project. And this is because, and this just makes my own heart just pound, that the heartbeat of God is to live with us in a shared home. That was his desire in the beginning, and that's his desire today, that we would know his presence. And I know that creation can't possibly contain God, for as Psalm 148:13 says, his majesty is above earth and heaven. But somehow he designed the world in such a way that he can dwell in it with us. He can be present in it with us in this honestly exhilarating and satisfying father, sons, and daughters relationship. So the intro comes down to this, that God is love, and God made a house where we could be face to face with him. And then we know, too, that the plot thickened and got complicated because our sin opened the front door to God's house to these evil forces that are led by this rebel ruler and this false king. And we know, most tragically, that our sin made God's immediate presence in this house impossible and even dangerous. But we have to say that our sin may have delayed completion, but it did not cancel God's plan to dwell with us. And when all is said and done, you might ask, does God get what God wants? Does God get the home with his creatures that he desires? Well, we've got to skip to the series finale here. And sorry for the spoiler alert here, but this is Revelation 21:3. It says, I heard a loud voice from the throne say, look, God's dwelling is here with humankind. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples. Catch this. God himself will be with them as their God. And we will live with him in his home, and we will see his glorious face. Well, that's really the intro and really the end point too. And so what we've been studying is how it is that God recovers his home and his children. And this is where the rest of the Bible comes in. And this is where the Gospel of John comes in, because the Gospel of John relates Yahweh's unique and climactic and long-promised coming to us in his incarnate, that is his flesh and blood word, Jesus, in the first century. See, God had never stopped coming, right? He came to Adam and Eve right after the fall, and he came to Abraham, and this is really weird, in his visible word. How was a word visible? But he came somehow, and he came again and again. But when he came in Jesus, it wasn't a temporary form or facade that the word of Yahweh took, but this permanent incarnation of the word of Yahweh, becoming a true human being like us while never sacrificing a shred of deity. And this is the greatest, most astonishing event that the world has ever experienced. So that's the intro, okay? And now we can really appreciate when John, in the book that we're studying, says this about Yahweh's homecoming in the most unexpected way in Jesus. It says, and the Word, right, the Word of Yahweh became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus is Yahweh visible to us and back at home with us. And this story is just remarkable. We're gonna pick it up here. But what I was thinking is, as we go along today, and we just think about all that we've been experiencing in our world over the last, number of years, we could just catalog the crises and so on. And I was thinking this last week about the winds. And just these winds that come out of nowhere, right? I got a picture from Frank about a tree that had fallen from his yard into the neighbor's house. and there's just been a tremendous amount of wind damage. And I was thinking about this wind that just tore up these trees, and then thinking about these winds of circumstance that maybe this week just blew over and blew away some expectation about the future that you were cherishing. Maybe some wind blew this week that just absolutely knocked over something that you were hoping in, that you were expecting, and you just feel literally and figuratively and spiritually blown over this week. I bet if I were to sit down with you in my office and we were to have a cup of coffee together, I bet that you would be able to share with me some way where you just feel wind whipped because of what's going on in your present circumstances. And I thought about this poem, When the Winds Hit, this week. Let me just share it to you. I'm kind of a poetry guy. Sorry for all you STEM people, but I do like poetry here. This is Robert Frost, okay? It says, the rain to the wind said, you push, and I'll pelt. They so smote the garden bed that the flowers actually knelt and lay lodged, though not dead. I know how the flowers felt. And maybe that's you. Maybe you think, yeah, I know how the flowers felt. And maybe what you need this morning more than anything is just a fresh sense of God's presence. And so what I've asked is for my daughter Anna to come up and to sing a song called My Presence that will ground us again in the presence and the nearness of our Heavenly Father. And then we'll continue with John 14.
There is someone who greets me the moment I rise. There is someone who watches me open my eyes. Creator of clouds and cerulean skies. There is someone who greets me the moment I rise. There is someone who walks with me all through the day. There is someone I trust who won't lead me astray. Each bluebird and poppy are his on display. There is someone who walks with me all through the day. Oh, his presence, I rejoice in his presence. Earth and heaven overlap when he speaks. There is someone who sings over me in the night. There is someone who puts all the darkness to flight. The maker of every heavenly light. There is someone who sings over me in the night. Oh, his presence. I rejoice in his presence. Earth and heaven overlap when he speaks. I rest safe and enclosed in his arms. Goodness radiates out from his heart. There is someone who stood by me all through the years. He is faithful through laughter and faithful through tears. I know 'cause he's with me, I've nothing to fear. There is someone who stood by me all through the years. Oh, his presence. I rejoice in his presence. Earth and heaven overlap when he speaks. Oh, his presence. I rejoice in his presence. Earth and heaven overlap when he speaks.
Well, if you're feeling a little wind-whipped and a little lodged, like the flower in that poem, we get fourfold reassurance from John chapter 14, 1 through 14. And the first reassurance point we get is this: it's to be comforted and to be still. The sun is going, but will come again and again and again. This is John 14, 1 through 4. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also, and you know the way to where I am going. And I think we want to begin by just inviting all of us just to take a deep breath if you are a believer, because regardless of what's blowing around us, each believer has a perfectly trustworthy parent. And we have a perfectly windproof family compound just waiting in the future. And John tells us, or Jesus tells us just a little bit about what it's like. He says this house has many dwelling places. And that's meant to suggest that there is space for all God's children. There's ample square footage in the Father's house. And like I said with these winds, last week I went to the gym that I always go to, and there's an indoor portion that's just regular construction. And then after COVID, they built an outdoor section covered by a tent. Well, when I drove up to the gym, the whole outdoor gym was just torn apart by that storm. Just ripped off the tent and bent the tennis lights in half and destroyed a lot of the equipment because of the electronics in these machines and so on. Well, it just reminded me that though the wind blows, okay, God's house that our Lord is presently preparing for us cannot be impacted by the wind or any disaster or any unexpected occurrence. It's permanent. It's fixed, and Jesus is preparing it now. But I wanted to say, too, when some of us, when we hear this reference to the Father's house, that may not be such a positive. I don't know what your experience was growing up. For me, to hear and to consider an image of a Father's house is a very positive thing for me, because I just honestly, I think I have the world's best dad. I've got a great father, and I love to visit my dad's house. My dad always wants us to be in his house. And when I go to my father's house, here's what I get. I always get a welcome. In fact, a few years ago, when my dad got his first iPhone, we were showing him different apps, and we showed him the Find My app, all right? And when he recognized what this would allow him to be able to be constantly surveilling, okay, his kids and grandkids and know where they are at all times, because he wanted to keep his protective father-grandfather eye on everybody. And so when we visit him, inevitably, when we drive up, my dad is standing on his driveway looking at his phone, just knowing that we were just about to drive in. And when we come in, he throws his arms around us. He gives us all a welcome. And the next thing we find in my father's house is we find food. Because my dad has already cleaned out his local grocery store, Bel Air, in Elk Grove, California. And he hasn't just gotten healthy food. No. He's gotten fun food, like Pepperidge Farm cookies and tortilla chips and salsa. And the fridge is filled with that Izzy, juice stuff that all the grandkids love. And then he just jumps into his speech. He says, guys, there's plenty of food, so just take whatever you want. And then after we've just gorged ourselves on this fun food for an hour or so, he says this. He says, and by the way, what time do you guys want to eat? Because I'm barbecuing steaks. If you want a little preview of our Heavenly Father's banquet that he is preparing for his children, check out Isaiah 35:6. For a little preview. Next, when I go and see my dad, there's space. And it's not a big house. It's just a 3-bedroom, 2-bath tract house in kind of a nondescript neighborhood in Elk Grove, California. But somehow, my dad's love just makes the place bigger. It's just something about the way he just welcomes us. It just seems like it expands. And so, he always moves out of the master bedroom, and he gives it to Becky and me. And the cousins are all running around, and Becky likes this one little room. It's called the book room, where there's a nice chair, and she has her quiet time in the morning there. It just seems like it expands somehow. And it's something about my dad and his love that just makes it big. But I wanted to say this, that the best thing about being in my father's house is that my father's there. That's the very best thing. When I go, there's my dad. And after he's served everybody, he sits down on his throne, this recliner, and we just sit there. And we talk to him, and we talk about what's going on in our lives. And one of the best things about it is just honestly looking in my dad's face. My dad's face is one of my favorite faces in the whole world. I just love my dad's face. Well, I think the love of my earthly father, and I hope something like that was part of your experience. I know for many of you it probably wasn't. I think I've been particularly blessed. But I think the love of my earthly father and the abundance of his house is a reflection of the love of my heavenly Father and the abundance of his house. Well, here's where the comparison might break down a little, because my dad is great, but he's a forgiven sinner like I am. And he's not holy, holy, holy like our heavenly Father is. But here's what the Father did to prepare for us to be in his presence and to see his face in safety, that he sent his Son, because our sin makes co-residence in God's house impossible unless our sin is dealt with and removed far away. And that's what the Father did in sending his Son. So Jesus goes to the cross to condemn and to remove our sin so that we can exist under one roof, all together with our Father and our spiritual brothers and sisters. So, back to John. Jesus goes to get it ready for us, but even more, to get us ready for it and for him. He's going to prepare us for a dwelling where God's glory has no limits and will require no screening. And Jesus goes on to say, hey, I'm going, but now you know why. And I'm coming back, and I'm not going to leave you as orphans. I'm going to come back, he promises. In fact, he says he's going to come back again and again and again. He says he's going to come back 3 days later in the resurrection, that he's going to come back 50 days later in the Holy Spirit, now personalized in Jesus. And someday, he'll come back bodily and forever at the end of the age, when the New Jerusalem touches down and the whole transformed world will be our Father's house, filled with the glory of God. Just like the Holy of Holies in the temple was the concentrated place for the glory of God, the whole transformed cosmos will be the house of God. And we will dwell in his presence for endless and endless ages. And so you have to remember that if like the disciples in John 14, who were wind-whipped, who thought, how in the world, Jesus, can you be going? How does this make sense? You just got here. How could you go? And when our sense of God's methods just don't make sense, then we just have to remember, oh no, it is all for God's good purpose. Well, what's the second way to be reassured right here, right now, even in this room? Here it is. It's to be confident, because the path is a person, and you have him, believer. Well, Thomas is obviously as confused as we would have been had we been there in that room. And he says this in John 14, 5-6. He says, Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Well, Thomas, we know, he's loyal and he's courageous, but he's sometimes confused and doubting, just like the rest of us. And he wants an address. He wants a point on the map. He has no idea where the Father's house is. So he asks, how can we know the road? And then Jesus, ever surprising, says this, your rabbi, he's the road. It's me. I'm the map. I'm the GPS to the Father's house. You don't need a complex set of instructions. You don't need a hard-to-read set of philosophical principles. You don't need a list of pillars to check off one by one. You just need me. If you want the Father, Yahweh, his love, his house, and most of all, his beautiful face to gaze upon, you just cling to me. You cling to Jesus, the one whose face was itself marred beyond all comprehension when he was beaten and crucified to take away our sin. You just lean your whole weight on Jesus, the way the beloved disciple John did at the Last Supper. You lean and follow, lean and follow, lean and follow all through your life. And speaking of Jesus as the GPS to the Father's house, I remember it wasn't all that long ago, young people, when we did not have GPS. And in fact, it was only, 20 years ago? 25 years ago, something like that. And I remember when people first started to talk about these devices that they were going to make, and you could program an address, and it would take you wherever you wanted to go. And my first thought was, that's baloney. How could that possibly work? I would never trust something like that. Give me my stack of maps in the glove compartment. That's trustworthy. That's the way my dad navigated, and that's the way I'm going to do it too. Well, so I was really dismissive at first, and about, maybe 20 years ago, I had to rent a car to drive down to Southern California for a ministry conference, and I noticed when I got in this rental car that it had a GPS built right into that little console between the driver's seat and the passenger seat. And I just looked at it dismissively, like, I'm not going to need that thing. I've got my maps. So anyway, I drive down, and the plan is to spend the night in Bakersfield with some friends of ours. And I get into Bakersfield, and it's late, and I'm tired, and I can't make sense of these directions that I had taken from my friend Dan Cole. And I'm just sitting there. Finally, I just park, and I think, I don't know what to do. I can't read this. I'm off the path. And then all of a sudden, my eye catches the GPS. And I think, well, why not? let's fire this thing up and give it a run. So I turn it on, the screen lights up, I plug in my address, and all of a sudden it starts to talk to me. And it's like a voice from heaven telling me, left on Everson Parkway, right on, whatever it is. And 15 minutes later, I am parked right in the front, right in the front of my friend's house. I honestly was so shocked. I was so blown away that I went into the house and all I could talk about with my friends was the GPS. I thought, this is the most amazing thing. And when I got home a few days later after this conference, I practically dragged Becky out to the rental car. And I said, honey, you've got to see this thing. This is absolutely unbelievable. And I took her on a ride and so on. I didn't want to give the car back. And not because of the car. It's just because of the GPS. But I think that that's an analogy for the spiritual life. The world offers old, hard to read, hard to use, and worst thing, erroneous maps to God. They don't get us to the Father's house. All the philosophies and the systems. Jesus is the GPS to his house. And when we're programmed to him, he leads us with his voice to the Father's house. John 10, 27 through 28. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will not perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand, or we could add the Father's house. And so if you're programmed to Jesus, you follow Jesus, you're going to find yourself at the Father's front door when it's all said and done. Well, what's the third way for us in this crazy world with the winds and the storms and this house presently shot through with evil and wars and storms and oppression, but only for a short time longer? What's the next way to be reassured? Again, right here and right now. Here it is. It's to be in awe. The Son is the visible Yahweh, God with us. And I just love these verses because they are absolutely awe-inspiring. It says, John 14, 7 through 9, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it will be enough for us. Jesus said to him, have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? And what we see here in this interchange between Philip and Jesus is that despite their high regard for Jesus, they don't regard him high enough. And now Philip takes over for Thomas. Again, they haven't grasped who he is, and Jesus is again gently going to help them to see who he really is. And Philip boldly asks for a vivid display of God himself. He says, show us the Father, and we'll be satisfied, which is kind of humorous. And obviously that's bold, because he obviously knows the story about how even Moses was allowed to only see the back and a glimpse of the glory of Yahweh. But Jesus, the Word of Yahweh, made flesh, he doesn't rebuke him. He just chides him gently. It says, Philip, you've been around me for these 3 years. You've heard my words and how they echo someone else. And you've seen my actions and how they image someone else. And you still don't recognize who I am. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. And I think the only response, and this is the kind of awe that I think pushes down anxiety in our lives, that Jesus is Yahweh in visible form. And John wants us to see how closely fused, how fully identified Jesus is with the Father. Because, really is easy to make the Father and the Son too far apart, right? To almost like disconnect them from each other, and some people have. And as a result, they kind of generate these kind of weird divine child abuse theories, which is obviously wrong. And we know that John teaches, and this is a mystery, that there is a distinction, right? Jesus says that his words and works are given to him by the Father. And he speaks about the Father in the third person, right? So there's a distinction, but almost like a rubber band. As soon as we pull Father and Son too far apart, almost like a rubber band that you let go of, they snap right back together. And we just see this here in this passage because here's one of the snapbacks. Jesus uses the I am language. I am the way. And that's an echo of Yahweh, who identified himself as the great I am. Back in Exodus 3:14. Well, here's another maybe more compelling snapback. It's that Jesus accepted worship that only belongs to God, right? No mere human should ever be worshiped, venerated, praised at the highest level. But after Jesus healed the blind man, something only Yahweh can do. The Bible says only Yahweh can open the eyes of the blind, right? He sought him out after all the false shepherds had kicked him out of the temple. And what does this man do? John 9:38, it says, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. He worshiped him. And Jesus accepted it. This was no problem. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. You know, I was at a men's retreat a couple weeks ago for a church in Walnut Creek that my brother pastors, and of course he needed somebody to come for cheap, right? So he thought, oh, he can call his brother. So he called me, and some of the guys were asking, well, who's going to come? Who's going to share with us at this retreat? And Dan said, well, let me put it this way. If you've seen me, you've seen our speaker, okay? So here we go. This is my brother Dan right here, okay? And but guys were continue to ask, well, you know, what are you talking about here? And finally, Dan said, I walked in the room and I saw the eyes of these men light up. And they said, yep, that's true, because here we go, right here. If you've seen me, you've seen my brother Darren. And, you know, there's just something then like that here. I know the analogy breaks down because Yahweh in heaven is invisible. But if you've seen the visible on earth Yahweh, you've seen the invisible in heaven Yahweh. You know God if you know his Son. And this is awe-inspiring to think about this, that he came to us. And then he goes even further. He says, Jesus says, they're not just fused together, but they fill each other. And I don't know exactly how to understand that, but that's what he says. Look at this. Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. And we alluded to this, but just take even just the words, the deeds of Jesus. He does what only Yahweh does. Feeding in the desert, saving from water, just echoing, imitating these great works of Yahweh at the Exodus. Well, what's the upshot of all this? That Jesus shares the Father's Yahweh identity. It's that fresh awe of Jesus, that when awe about him is rekindled, anxiety has to disappear. It just has to get pushed to the sides. Maybe not totally eliminated, I get it. But when we're filled with awe at who this Jesus is that we know, anxiety has to give way. You know, when we're in awe and wonder of Jesus, it's hard to be anxious and worried about what's going on in the world. You know, higher awe of Jesus means lower anxiety. It's a negative correlation, right? When the variable of awe of Jesus is high, the variable of anxiety about the world is low. And I bet when you walk out here today, after hearing these songs and being around the people of God, your anxiety level will be lower than it was when you came in. And also what this does for us is if you're new to this whole Christian thing, and maybe you look at the world and you're scared. You don't know what's going on. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, what's God like? Is he for me? Is he friendly? Does he love me? Would he want a personal relationship with me? Well, the answer to all those questions is just 5 letters. It's Jesus. He's the proof of who God is and his desire to be in relationship with you. And when you lean on and follow after him, you don't just get eternal life in a dream house someday that will be here when the New Jerusalem descends, but you get something a million times better than the dream house. You get the dream God. You get the dream God. Who else would you want your God to be than the one revealed in Jesus, who my wife loves this scene. He just came, he shared a home. That's symbolic. He was in a home with ordinary people like Lazarus and Mary and Martha, because that's the ultimate vision of God sharing a home with us, an intimacy and love that never ends. Well, I got to wrap this up here. What's the fourth way here to gain reassurance right here, right now? And it's this. This might surprise you a little bit, but it's to be active, always on God's homemaking mission. And here's the passage. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do. Greater works than these will he do, because I am going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. And these statements, I know, when we slow them down and really read them, they challenge us, don't they? To act and to pray with great confidence. And we know he's not exaggerating, right? Because he prefaces his words with truly, truly. He wants this to sink in. Well, I think the big idea here is that the person who's united to Jesus will express that connection in acts of real, practical love, just like Jesus himself, loving people, meeting needs, encouraging, talking about his Father. And the reason that the person connected to Jesus will express that connection in acts of real, practical love is that Jesus goes to the Father. And Glen will talk about this next week. And the Father will send another helper, because this mystery is going to continue. And Glen will talk about that next week. But when Jesus, I think what Jesus is saying is that when his Spirit fills his people, they will go out and they will multiply on a quantitative level acts of real, practical love. So what's the point for us? Let's just join in. Let's not give way to anxiety and fear and being frozen in place. Let's be active. Let's join God's homemaking mission. This is my Father's world, right? Let's be active together. Let's not worry about the future, our difficulties and our disappointments. Let's be about his business. And he'll take care of the details of our lives, right? Where we're going to live, where we're going to study, where we're going to work, how this or that health issue is going to be carried out. Let's not let the cares of this world overcome our commitment to prayer and active service. Let's be active in inviting people to be reconciled to God through Jesus. I've been spending a last number of Friday nights at the Betha House, Mihai and Donna. They are so interested in their Romanian friends coming to faith that they just invite them over, and we have Donna's delicious food, play some Jesus videos, reading a book called 7 Ways to Rediscover Christianity, and we're just having a great time together. Here's another, speaking of home building, how about this? I just got a text message from Jamie Allen yesterday. Jamie and the team have putting in a shocking number of hours in refurbishing this house. And this apartment 6 down at Grace Village, and Jamie sent me this text. I asked him, how'd the work go today? He said this, he said, hey, it was thanks to Harry and Robert, okay? And then he referred to them jokingly as employees of the month because of their incredible contributions. And so many people have been going down there. And you can see here before and after. Before, no door. The end of the day, and this is complex, putting in the door. The door is all done. It's locked. Another step forward in making a secure dwelling for a vulnerable mom. We're going to start a food pantry starting April 14th. We're going to be giving food out on our patio, and just making friends with people who come who have food scarcity. In our Father's house, there's food aplenty, right? So we're going to give food and make friends, and we're going to talk about what Thomas is doing and talk about what Frank is doing and what Louise and Sue Lynn and Sonia and all the children's people. We're just going to make friends. And this is a no strings attached then we're just going to make friends, give food, and see what God does. So just all kinds of good things that God is doing. Speaking of praying, again, this really hit me hard this week. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. And this is an invitation extended to a group, right? To the disciples. So I think the takeaway is let's pray together. Let's worship together like we're doing here. We're going to have this inter-church devotional worship night a week from tonight. And not just our church, other churches. We're going to cram this place. So come out. Let's worship and pray together and seek our Father's face. And I'll just end with this because I'm a little bit over. Speaking of worship, and speaking of kind of like concert-type venues, back in 1996, and this is before GPS, all right, when Becky and I were a newly minted youth pastor couple, okay, we got thrown in with the middle school kids at Santa Cruz Bible Church, our first ministry job, and we didn't know much about, youth culture, youth music, but there was this band called Audio Adrenaline that the students loved. Maybe some of you listen to Audio Adrenaline and so on. And they had a song called Big House, which the lyrics I put at the top of your notes. And when we heard that Audio Adrenaline was going to play in the Bay Area, we reserved the church bus, piled all the kids on, and we went to see this concert. And I will never forget this night, and never forget when the band played Big House. The kids went nuts. And here's some of the lyrics. It's a big, big house with lots and lots of room, a big, big table with lots and lots of food, a big, big yard where we can play football, a big, big house. It's my Father's house. And I'll never forget just the joy on the faces of these students. They were intoxicated only with Jesus and the music and their friends and the hope that they had, which the youth of today need to have too, right? About what God has done in Jesus. And then at the climactic moment, at the line about the football, the lead singer grabbed a Nerf football from somewhere and threw it into the crowd. And some kid grabbed it and threw it back, and they're throwing catch back and forth with the football. Just an amazing moment. And the song goes on. Here's my invitation to you. All I know is a big old house with rooms for everyone. All I know is lots of land where we can play and run. All I know is you need love, and all I know is you're all alone. So why not come with me? Come with me to my Father's house. Come with me to my Father's house. We're going to sing one song. We're going to sing The Way, the Truth, and the Life. And I got an invitation for you. Maybe you're thinking, I want to know this Father. I want to have a place in his house someday. And even more than that, I want my heart to be his home right now. I want to invite you to come down. If you want to be reconciled to the Father through Jesus, come down. You can pray with Becky and me, or Glen's going to be down here. Uncle Bert and Diane, you can pray with them. Alex and Kathy are over here. We've got the DeVilliers. Come down and pray. You just get up from your seat and walk down. Take a step. Say, I want to be reconciled to God. I want the Father in my heart through Jesus, and I want to be in his house someday. And we'll pray, and you can do some business with God. And the rest of us, let's worship and give praise to our Heavenly Father.